season 2. Okay.
Okay, now I just unmuted myself. And then the video camera's muted, so I click on that, and I get a screen with one of those warning triangles with the exclamation in it. It says, cannot start video, failed to start the video camera. Please select another video camera in settings. Now, I went to settings, and I didn't go to settings, I went to camera. Maybe that was my mistake. All right. So, okay, there's settings. And what would the camera fall under?
I'm wondering if you can share your screen with me.
Sure.
So go to open up Chrome, the Chrome browser.
Okay, that's what I was using for Zoom. Okay, go ahead.
Nick.
Open up a new tab.
You need to turn him down. Like, what is this?
Okay, done.
And what you want to do is, I haven't done this in a while, so look. Okay, type in remotedesktop.google.com.
remotedesktop.google.com. Okay. And it says get support, generate code.
Yes, generate code, and then feed that code to me.
Okay. 5594 7479 3047.
Okay, so you should probably get a message letting me in.
Yep. Share.
Okay, I can see your screen now. So now what I'm going to do is if I go to,
The Zoom meeting tab would be where I'm connected in.
okay, so I'm there. It's chosen.
But if you try and click on it, you get the warning.
Okay. Close out this for a second.
Okay.
phones are locked. I'm usually over there with Dave. There's
Make it key down, you know.
COVID delays.
Well, apparently it's more storm delays because,
Oh, really?
so many trees and branches and stuff had fallen. I guess there's a lot of repairs going on,
Oh, really?
for one thing. And, again, there's as many accidents as there always is.
Right.
But it took the other guy's insurance company
Start
a long
video.
time to
Same-ish,
even
same
find a claims adjuster.
thing.
That's-
Cannot start video.
I
Um,
guess you just they'll be able to hear you. In fact, I hear you on the live stream, so they can hear you. They just can't see you.
All right, and should I try and get on with my phone and use that as a camera
Yes, please.
and turn the volume off?
They said yes.
You can use it as your
Um,
Zoom meet.
I think at this point, your audio is probably more important than your video.
Okay.
I mean, I think I would hate to. I mean, if you want to try to connect with your phone, it can't hurt. Do you have the Zoom app?
Yeah, I do.
Try it. Like, I guess you can try that. I mean, but your phone is pretty old, isn't it?
No, it's a 7. It's I was forced to upgrade from my flip phone, Ray.
Well, you could try it. I mean, I guess it's untested. Last week we were having audio problems.
Right. Well, all right. So I'll leave it alone for this, and then I'll see if maybe we can figure out what's going on with it.
Yeah, if you could possibly bring that computer in.
Sure.
Or stop there, we can help.
Okay. I'll give you a call either at the end of the week or beginning of next week, and we can set up a time. Will that work?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. I guess they just won't see my handsome face.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Are we all set? We're good? We can reconvene our meeting to open session. The board has been in executive session since 6:10 to discuss a BCUEA contractual matter, a personnel matter, and a student issue. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could have introductions.
Dave Hurst.
Wendy Sampson. Jody Monroe. Holly Dellenbaugh. Meredith Moriarty.
Chris Meyer.
Christine Beck. Judy Kehoe. We have Jonathan Fishbein is joining remotely, and Willow Bear is unable to attend this evening. First on the agenda is approval of minutes. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the October 21st, 2020 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Next is our superintendent's report.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So the first thing I wanted to address is I did follow up with the request to consider additional crossing guards that we received a month ago. So Judy and I met with David Van Leuven and Adam Hornick of the Bethlehem Police Department. We went over.
Hey, Ray, I can't hear a word.
Yeah.
It says here Jody's mic is muted.
Oh, everybody can hear you. I just heard you loud and clear.
Can you hear now, Jonathan?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. So Judy and I met with David Van Leuven and Adam Hornick to talk about the crossing guard request. We reviewed there were 3 requests for us to consider, and we talked about one of the issues is trying to find people to staff those. And I think we talked at one of the last meetings, or David had responded that if a crossing guard is not available, meaning they're absent from work that day, it's required that a police officer then fill in those locations. And clearly, the Bethlehem Police doesn't have the staffing to fill those either. But they are going to look at the crossing guard that's on Delaware and Van Dyke, because there's very few kids that actually cross there. So they're going to do a traffic study to see if perhaps moving that that crossing guard to one of those other location would make sense. So they have numbers. They've been doing some studies and analysis of how many people are using some of those areas. The one crossing area near Hammer Grill that was mentioned, they did feel like that might be something that if PTOs were interested in setting up a volunteer schedule of, it wouldn't be a crossing guard, but flaggers, that would make sense in one of those locations. They obviously would not recommend that on high traffic areas like Delaware Avenue, but in an area like Hammer Grill, they felt that that would be appropriate and did not object to PTOs doing something like that. So I did follow up with Erin, who had sent the email on behalf of the Pedestrian and Bike Safety Committee. I had a conversation with her the other day, and we talked about some other things that could be done to just raise awareness as well. And I told her that we could circle back later on. I did let her know, and she had spoken to the police that they were doing some studies of the number of kids and families using specific crossing areas to see if it warranted some changes. So there's currently 7 posts that they have guards for, and there's only 2 subs that they have to utilize, so it's pretty limited.
If the PTAs or PTOs did provide flaggers
Yep.
in that location, would they need any kind of training, or could they just kind of
They could just
throw on a
vest,
reflective vest and
go out.
stand out with a flag?
Right.
Okay.
But if there was negligence in any way, who would cover the liability? Would it be the school? Because I know PTOs are required to have PTO insurance to some degree, but I mean, like if they did something that was negligent and caused, some sort of harm or did something in an inappropriate way, would that fall on the school or would it fall on the individual? I mean, that might be a little problematic.
Or
If
the
we- I mean, that might be
driver at
something to-
fault. I'll check with the carrier,
Okay.
just to pose that specific question.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that,
No.
so,
Auto insurance makes you think like that, sorry.
yeah. I also wanted to let everyone know that we also are developing a code of conduct as it relates to COVID in our reopening plans, similar to what colleges have implemented. This document will address the DOH guidelines and expectations for both on and off-campus activities and identify what potential consequences are for not following these safety guidelines. So this will be reviewed with the reopening task force tomorrow at a scheduled meeting. Then it will be rolled out to families. I have 3 parent meetings scheduled, one tomorrow night with just high school families. And then there's 2 next Tuesday for any parents K-12. And then after that, we'll release it as part of our reopening plans. So that's my report tonight.
Anybody have any questions? Next up on the agenda is our board report this evening. First, I just wanted to mention that the policy committee met last week. And we, in addition to the policies that are on the agenda tonight for a first read, we did take a look at a draft anti-racism policy. We agreed to share it with our, the district's Equity Diversity Committee so that they could provide some feedback. And then depending on how much they have, we're hoping that we can get it on the agenda for our next meeting for a first read. Just so that's kind of the goal. That's where we are with that. And then I just wanted to share that I attended virtually the NYSBA conference that was held this past week. And there were a couple things that stood out to me in the different presentations that I listened to. One was the keynote address. They had 3 doctors, and I guess that's kind of what they go by, the 3 doctors. And they go around, they have a presentation that they do. They all were friends, they grew up together in Newark, New Jersey, in not great circumstances, but because of what they were, some of the teachers that they had and what they were exposed to in school, the options that they were given, they ultimately, all 3 of them went on to become doctors of different things. One of the quotes that they repeated a couple times was, "You can't aim for what you can't see." And they felt it was so valuable just to have been shown different options at early ages in their education, and to the idea of giving kids multiple chances and not pigeonholing them in a certain way at an early age, because they said if people had done that to us, we would not be where we are today. So it was powerful to listen to. And then one of the other programs that there was a presentation about was a cultural awareness focused presentation. It was a program called Bridges through the Uniondale and Oceanside school districts down in Long Island. And Oceanside is 85% white, and Uniondale is 97% Black and Latinx. And they have created this program for a select number of 7th through 12th graders that have to apply to it. So it's a 6-year program, and they meet 2 or 3 times during the year at each school, and they're trying to build bridges between their communities, given how close they are. They're only about, I think, 10 to 15 minutes apart from each other, but are representing vastly different demographics. And they said it's been great with respect to student engagement and really eye-opening for the kids on both sides. So it's just something that I would keep in mind in case there's ever something like that. It's run by 2 teachers, one at each school, that really have a passion for it, and they were the ones that presented the program. But I just thought it'd be great to keep our own eyes open for opportunities like that. And then the third thing was a presentation that was looking at diversity in curriculum, which I thought was relevant given some of the work that I know we've been doing. And one of the comments was to make sure that in addition to looking at academic curriculum, that schools look at their social and emotional curriculum and the social and emotional learning. Because one of the schools that was presenting commented that they had made a lot of changes in terms of their academics, and then they went and they realized that the materials that their counselors and their psychologists were using to do social and emotional learning in the elementary school and in the middle school were not at all diverse and not at all reflecting different people or different cultures, different backgrounds, anything. So I just thought that was an interesting point, and throw that one out there too. Anyone else have anything to?
Well, we had the facilities committee meeting right before the policy committee, and basically we just wrapped up the last final items for the bond work, and it should be done shortly before.
Yes.
When's the deadline?
We have to file our final cost reports by December 31st. So it needs to wind down in the beginning of December, and then we'll prepare the reports, and
We'll be done
we'll
with
use our
bond work.
wonderful facilities and get our state aid flowing.
And just to thank you for all of the work that you did on the anti-racism policy work. I know that was pretty intensive, and in a short period of time, you put together a great starting point for the policy, so thank you for that work.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Next on the agenda is our public hearing on the district-wide safety plan. Tonight, we are holding the public hearing on our proposed revised district safety plan as required by education law. Residents of the district could submit comments either for or against on the proposed policy ahead of time using the district's email address. And we had said that any comments received prior to the start of the meeting would be entered into the record at this point. And we did not receive any comments on the district-wide safety plan. Next on the agenda is our presentation this evening, and our presentation this evening is by Ms. Monroe on our district strategic plan update.
Sure, thank you. So typically when I do the strategic plan update, there's a lot more information to share, but I wanted to share at least what we were able to collect as of now and what our goals are for the coming year. So, back in 2018 was when we introduced the 5-year strategic plan. We developed new mission statement and core values and identified 72 performance metrics that we wanted to track. Our mission statement we came up with is to educate and prepare all students to reach their potential, discover their purpose, and be engaged community members. In our core values, we identified as academics, character, community, and wellness, and that's how our metrics are broken up. So this year, due to COVID, 61% of our year 2 metrics could not be measured, and 92% of them were impacted in some way. So basically what we did is just went through and tried to identify what targets we were able to meet, what did we not meet, and what we, COVID didn't have any data for. So if we looked at academics, you can see that it's mixed. Some of these, the iReady data is the June data, so where students took the assessments at home. We did do a fall assessment, so we're looking at comparative data to see how we performed. And you can see any of the 3 through 8 testing, because the state didn't administer those, that's noted with a C for COVID. The next one's just continuation of iReady, as well as some of the 3 through 5 assessments. Again, they're mixed. Some of the areas we met and some of them we did not meet. And some are COVID related again. Continuing on a more iReady, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide here. Some of our Regents exam, if you recall, all the Regents exams were canceled. So there's lots of reds here because we don't have the data. Basically, students were exempted from the Regents exams last year. Continuing on with academics, you can see our graduation rates were a little bit lower. That's a small percentage when you look at overall academics. And again, some of these we met, some we didn't, and many of these we didn't have data to collect. So last year when I was presenting, I talked about how year 2 would be really important to identify some trends and really direct our staffing, and so that's a little bit skewed at this point. We were starting to see some advances in closing our learning gaps. You can see we were making some progress. And part of that was, I think, just really drawing some attention to the economically disadvantaged, special ed population in ENL, and how can we really do more to support some of those learners. But last year in the spring, you can see all of those were impacted by COVID because of the lack of assessment data. Continuing on some of the academic pieces, we were talking about special ed, the learning gaps. Again, much of this was impacted by COVID and the lack of data that we had or had at the end of the year. And looking at character, we did do the school climate survey in December, which is when we've traditionally done it. So we did have data for that. Again, it was only year 2, and we did change, if you remember, some of the survey questions to be more I statements to get better information. This year, unfortunately, I think the school climate survey, we're going to have to, doesn't make sense to do, but we'll look at some other alternative to assess some of the mental health pieces that we want to make sure we're keeping track of. On to community. One of the biggest changes we had last year was the budget vote in the ballots. So we had a lot of turnout for that, and we exceeded the number of budget votes, certainly by a lot, or the number of participants, I should say. So moving forward, we'll see where we are this year and what we have to do with the budget vote. And with wellness, a lot of these are from the school climate survey. Again, I think that this is going to be a challenge to try and get data on this year, but in areas we can, when we really want to focus on overall mental health and wellness, we'll look to do something probably after the beginning of the school year. One of the areas related to wellness we were spending a lot of time on and really trying to improve, which you can see we're certainly impacted by COVID, but we were seeing some progress. This one shows 5% to 9% of absenteeism, so you can see that those numbers were declining, which is what we wanted to see. And on the next slide, where we're looking at the chronic absenteeism, which is 10% or more, we were really starting to see some improvement in that. And that was really just concerted efforts on trying to work with families and letting them know the importance of being in school and not having a lot of absenteeism. But, we'll have to cycle back to that at some point. So really everything has been impacted by COVID. Testing, all the student opportunities, co-curricular activities, and even the budget vote, like I mentioned. We did think it was important to set some goals, though, for this year. So in academics, we are still continuing our 5-year program reviews. Last year did not get completed, so our goal is to finish those. I think one of the important areas we recognize is really looking at our learning gap. It's caused by school closures and caused also by students who are virtual. Looking at diversity in our curriculum, looking at sexual harassment and gender equality still, and then focus on instructional technology, which has become a very important aspect of our instructional program. Under character, we did try and keep our goals reasonable this year, knowing that we had a lot of things going on with COVID, but we do have goals related to equity and cultural responsiveness, as well as staff training on gender identity, relationships, consent, and sexual harassment. And some of those things have already begun taking place. Our goals related to the community is really just to continue to provide outreach to families who we're finding need more and more support. So we have identified things that we will continue with in some new ways of reaching out to families who need support. And the next slide, I do want to just highlight, we started the Bridge to College program, and we have a short little video clip of a student who can share a success story on the Bridge to College program that I thought would be worth hearing from him. So.
Hello, my name is Josh Zhang, and I'm the first person in our family to attend college. You have every reason to be proud of your work and accomplishments, and we anticipate you reaching even greater heights at Pennsylvania. It's both exciting and a little bit scary. It's exciting because you're doing something that no one else in your family has done before. It's a little bit scary because, for the most part, you'll be doing this alone. I didn't have my parents to ask for their opinions or their advice.
So, back to you. We good? Okay. So a success story, which I thought was worth sharing. Our next goal related to wellness. We're basically looking at social, emotional learning and mental health. That's a big component of our reopening plan, as well as staff resources to help support the mental health and well-being of our staff as well. And our focus this year, we've had a lot of discussions, really has to be on people. Our students, our staffs, our families, everyone is struggling. It's a tough time, and we feel that, yes, we wanted to make sure we had some goals, so we had focus, but we also recognize that any day these things could all change. So I think we will, obviously, if we have exams this year, we'll have some data, but I really think that after we're kind of back to normal, whatever that looks like, that we're probably going to need to revisit our strategic plan, revisit what our metrics are, reset the baselines, and perhaps make some changes to that moving forward. So I think that we all recognize that we're in just an unusual time that requires flexibility, and that once we're back to where hopefully we will be soon in a more normal, stable environment, that we'll go back and revisit the strategic plan and the metrics. So that's the updates I can provide at this time. So I don't know if anyone has questions. And Chris, I think I met your 10 minutes.
Do we know, have any information about the exams or midterms taking place in January, whether they're happening, not happening?
So we don't know. We believe that January exams, Regents exams, are still happening, although there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not they will. The state was supposed to make some kind of statement, I thought, a while ago, or not a while ago, but couple of weeks ago, and we haven't heard anything. So some departments are planning on doing midterms. What we've talked to the high school about is that for those who are going to administer midterms, to have midterms that can be flexible, because if we don't have January exams, you can't have kids just not report to school. You only are allowed to not have kids attending school because Regents are in session. So we're trying to be flexible. We also recognize that things are just ever changing. So we're still working through that with different departments and what they think is going to be appropriate for their classes. So, I don't know, Dave, if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I mean, we've had a lot of departments that are also looking at what some of the colleges are doing in terms of flexibility, as opposed to having such a rigid schedule. You kind of schedule the exam over like a 48-hour window.
Yep.
And basically when the kids log on to the platform, as soon as they log on, their clock starts. They then have whatever the time limit is, and then they finish up. But then that at least gives some flexibility in terms of when they can take it. It also helps with some of the equity issues in terms of if you have multiple kids at home trying to take assessments, if bandwidth is an issue at home, it's just, it eliminates all of that because you can really find a time that really works for you. So some departments I know are looking at that as an option, but many are deciding that trying to do a traditional midterm just might not make sense this year. So still in discussion. And a lot of it does hinge on whether the Regents exams are offered or not. Because if they're not offered, that definitely changes the way departments are going to approach it.
And one question that I know some families have asked is, for students who are virtual only, how does January Regents happen? State Ed has said that Regents exams have to be administered on site. So students who are virtual would have to come into the building to take the assessments. And they've said the same for the 3 through 8 assessments and the June Regents exams as well.
Do
And
we, oh, go ahead,
I
sorry.
was gonna say, we do have 2 classes that prepare for January exams. Our lab school science course does take the living environment in January.
Yep.
And our Algebra 2 stretch program takes it in January as well.
Right.
So about 90 kids in the Algebra 2 program, and anywhere between 20 and 30 any given year on the science exam. So we're sort of fortunate in that we don't have a ton of kids that rely upon the January offering, but it's still over 100 kids that would be impacted should they cancel.
I was just gonna ask if the state is gonna be requiring, some of our virtual learners to come in to take some of these tests, can we offer, accommodations to them in terms of they wouldn't be going right into the classroom with their classmates? Could we offer them a classroom where they're the only child in the room or anything like that?
I mean, if we have the exams and students come in, we obviously would set them up in larger spaces. We would do 6-foot distancing, but it's not like we could have one student in a classroom.
I
if
mean,
you've
I was
got-
just wondering, can you do, so you have to do it at the same time?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
Okay.
you don't have, it's administered on this date between this
okay,
time block.
okay, well, then I would.
In the gym.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And I think you would have to have accommodations, like if you were to be like an individual person taking like a Regents exam, just like you would at the end of the year. Like you
Yeah.
couldn't just, because you're remote,
Right.
give you a separate space because.
Well,
you're-
but we would be required to give accommodations generally if someone had.
Yeah, if a student had an IEP with testing
Right.
accommodations, we would do that.
Right.
Correct.
Do any of our health concerns, can we fit those into accommodations? I don't know, I'm just concerned that we have some kids who cannot come into a large group setting like a gym.
I mean, the only option would be they could wait and take them in June. But right now, they still have to come on site in June. Or they could wait and take them in August. I mean, it just gets
Yeah.
delayed.
But if they had accommodations, they would still get accommodations. So
Yes.
If you're saying they have a health issue,
Right.
that if they have accommodations or they need to get accommodations, they could still do that.
Right.
Okay, so maybe we should be giving warning that they may need to go through the process to get accommodations.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, it's all gonna depend on if.
If they
I
have
know,
to
no one
come.
knows anything, but
wondering what
if it
the-
is a process to get an official accommodation,
Yes,
then people should be made aware of that, so
Yep.
they can start that process.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have an answer sooner rather than later, about
Yes.
January at least.
right,
And then we can go from there.
right.
And I know that like the strong focus is on mental health and making sure that the students are doing okay, first and foremost with their mental health issues, because it's a tough time. What are we, I guess for the juniors and the seniors that are graduating, with regards to ensuring they have all of the skills necessary to be college ready? Like, how are we determining that based on the fact, in the spring we had remote learning, there might have been a reduction in curriculum, and this year, are we looking at that cohort to just make sure that they have everything that they need?
Are you
It's not
talking about
just
the
that cool.
academic piece of it? Oh.
Yeah, like to see where the gaps were from last year and this
Yeah.
year before we just,
We- We were just talking about
Right.
that today.
But-
It's more, I guess it's more, you can notice differences more significantly in different content areas. So I don't know if you want to talk maybe a little bit about.
So I mean, it's just not juniors and seniors, it's really
Right.
K-12.
Right.
So when we talk about I just want to be careful, when we talk about prioritizing the curriculum, when the standards are written, they do identify sort of which are the critical standards and which are sort of extension standards. So when we say we prioritize, it's not like we're cutting out any of the critical standards. It's more of the enhanced standards that end up being maybe disemphasized because of time. But we are seeing, I'm going to present in a couple weeks on our elementary data anyways. Our students did take the iReady tests when they came back. And we're seeing that, we've been using it for 3 years now, and both grade level data and sort of trend data for each individual kid. On average, all of our numbers sort of aggregate are falling where they always have. We're not seeing huge learning gaps. At the secondary level, anecdotally, I'll tell you that math seems to be the largest area of struggle, and I think it's because that is, of all the disciplines, that's so relied upon the prior year, right? So I mean, to walk into a U.S. history class, if you missed a little bit of global, it's not going to be the end of the world, right? Whereas math, if you're missing some pieces of Algebra 1, it's going to be kind of hard to do some of the preliminary work in geometry that rely upon those skills. So some of our teachers are having to backfill that, and they recognize that. But while it's more sort of pronounced this year, that's not all that uncommon from year to year anyway. Students math is one of those areas where kids they do lose some of their skills over the summer, and you're always playing a little bit of catch up anyways. It's just a little bit more pronounced now, but teachers are well aware of that. They're assessing that. They're making modifications to the way they're assessing. They're making modifications to their pacing, but still knowing that for many courses they still have to take an AP exam or a readings exam. So there's that fine balance of how much time can we spend backfilling versus how much time do we just need to accelerate and sort of do those two things simultaneously.
And I think the other challenge is, we were talking today about it, is kids are getting used to new platforms for assessment. Teachers are getting used to it. So some of it is, how much are there gaps? How much is it a learning curve of new tools and ways of doing things? It's still fairly early on. I think that at the midpoint of the year, we'll have a better handle on that. I do think that, we've talked about kids who are virtual or at home for long periods of time. If, we have this whole year where there's a lot of kids who are virtual and their attendance isn't the greatest, I think we're going to see more significant gaps, more significant mental health issues come next year if that trend continues. But I think that a lot of it is we're doing a lot of things new this year, and it's definitely takes people time to get used to, teachers and students. It's very different.
And I recognize that it's a every grade level issue. I guess what made me think about it more so is, in the context of applying for college and the critical aspects that you need to move, to the next stage, which would be our juniors and seniors. And we do less assessments, I think, at the secondary level than we do at elementary. We have the iReady to see how reading's either stabilized or improving or decreasing. We don't have that mechanism at the high school. So I think some focus there in regards to the reading, writing, and the math. And it sounds like you're doing that just to make sure that there weren't some significant gaps for the juniors from last year that are currently seniors and for the current juniors, just to make sure that we're not missing those critical pieces that you were talking about. So it's good that
colleges are dealing with the same thing. I was in a conference call Saturday that involved some college professors, and they're seeing the same thing where they're having to adjust pacing, they're having to adjust the way they do assessments. So it's not like they're sort of oblivious to what's happening here. They're seeing it at their level too, and they're making adjustments on the college campus as well. Because just as much as our teachers have been thrown into having to teach remotely, so have they. And it's not comfortable for them any more than it is comfortable for high school teachers. So the learning curve is just as much happening at the secondary or at the college level as it is here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Valid point, though.
I would just say I really appreciate the last slide in all of this, particularly for the K-8, because I want us to be a high-performing school. I want the numbers to be phenomenal, but particularly for those little kids who've March happened and then they've been home for the past 6 months. For many of them, we're the only place where they get a social experience, and they're craving that. And so as much as I look at the goals, and we'll look at the iReady data and all those things, just being a place this year where kids can go and be a human being. It's it's weird to say you're a human being when you're 6 foot apart from someone wearing a mask, but for these kids, they're doing great with it, and just to have that social experience is so important for them right now. And I'm very, very happy and proud that we'll be able to provide that.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Jody? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Next on the agenda is our recognition of public comment. And we did have 2 comments that came in. The first comment from Karen Anthony, who writes, would the board consider letting the district go virtual for the 2 weeks after Thanksgiving break? We all know that families and friends will be getting together with people outside of their normal pods. Going virtual could help stop a possible spread outbreak of COVID within our district after Thanksgiving gatherings. Thank you for your time and consideration. And I just wanted to, so if people wanted to go personally, if they wanted to stay home for those 2 weeks after Thanksgiving,
Well,
how would that work?
it would be easier to do in secondary than obviously K-5, because we don't have, aside from the VLA, we don't have just a K-5 virtual option. You know,
Mhm.
kids can't stream into their classrooms. Right now, we don't have a plan to go virtual, and I think, you know, part of the concern is that we could be finding ourselves in situations where we are having to go virtual for a period of time due to quarantine and staffing issues. So we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. So I think it's easier to do 6-12, definitely does not work K-5.
And then the other comment came in from Karen Fitzgerald asking if there was a response regarding the comment that she made at our last meeting about going outdoors during recess for the middle school. And that was the comment that we, that did go to Mike Pleasant to follow up with her on that. Item 7, action items. A, finance action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 4.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll just thank Perfect Granola for their donation of over 2,000 packets of cinnamon granola for the breakfast program. That's great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. B, professional personnel action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following professional personnel action items 1 through 10.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item C, support personnel action items. We are removing item 1 from this list. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items 2 through 6.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. D, other action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following action items 1 through 7.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item 8, future meetings and events. Our next board meeting is on Wednesday, November 18th at 7, which will be here in D122, streamed for the public, anticipating an executive session at 6. Our meeting after that is on Wednesday, December 2nd at 7 p.m., anticipating an executive session at 6. On Monday, December 7th at 6 p.m., we have a policy committee meeting. And then our meeting after that is on Wednesday, December 16th at 7 o'clock. And anticipating likely an executive session at 6 o'clock. Seeing no need to go back into executive session, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Dave, I did have a question for you. Has there been any issue with you guys in regards to planning for computer-based testing?